Now, speaking of TikTok, as we were just before the break, and the fact that, well, I'm on it, Natasha's not, and your daughter's not on it either, is
I
she?
don't
You
know.
don't let
Now
her.
listen, she has found a way through YouTube Shorts to watch some TikTok videos,
Okay.
the same way I see some of them on Instagram
Okay.
sometimes, but she does not have the app. She has not downloaded it, and I don't want her to.
So Helen Bouygues is president of the Reboot Foundation, an expert on digital literacy and critical thinking skills. And obviously the concern here is for young adults, young people, and the impact that TikTok can and apparently does have on them. So let's try to find out what should be doing or what should we be doing here. And is there reason for concern? Helen, start off with that. Is there reason for concern as far as young people on TikTok, as far as you're concerned?
There is a significant reason for concern. One is, as you guys alluded to, the amount of usage of TikTok is really disturbing. An average teenager spends more than 2 hours a day, and over 23% actually use it 4+ hours a day.
my
So
Wow.
it's the pure usage. And then secondly, the other challenge is 42% of heavy users actually consider all of information on TikTok as reliable information. And actually they use social media, especially TikTok, about 91% uses it to gather information compared to, for example, newspapers. They only use less than 50% to do research. So it's not only the amount of usage, but it's also the influence it has. And unfortunately, as you know, approximately 1 out of 5 videos on TikTok actually does carry misinformation. So we're really not helping our children be good consumers of information today.
That's disturbing in and
I'll
of
say.
itself, obviously. And the fact that, and it's not just TikTok, I guess we can talk social media that way as well. The fact that you see something online, be it on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, you automatically assume as a young person, no, it must be accurate. It's on TikTok. You question virtually nothing.
It's the certification, the verification, and the perception of what that means. Verified accounts, it's purely just checking IDs to make sure that people are not impersonating.
Right.
But in reality, young children believe that indicates it's a reliable source of information. So there's that dimension. And then, unfortunately, based on our survey, the number of followers for our young children gives implication as to whether or not they're reliable sources as well.
I'm finding all of this so troublesome. And then beyond that, I just think the addictive nature of it is very troublesome. I wonder what kind of effect that has on their brains, especially developing brains, and just their mental health. What do we know about that, Helen Lee?
So one of the dimensions that we checked and asked questions to these young adults was their appreciation of science, because that kind of indicates a little bit of education. And one question that we kind of did as a throwaway question, but unfortunately the result came back very disturbingly, is for young users, basically 13 to 17-year-old teens of heavy TikTok users, they actually were willing to give up they give up their right to vote for a year. Over 64% said that they would give up their voting rights for a year rather than losing access to their social media accounts for 1 year. So what does that say
That's
about
crazy.
democracy and our actual belief in situations? And then secondly, another statistic that I wanted to share with you is for heavy users of TikTok, over 42% disagree that science actually helps the world more than it harms, versus 75% in general. And in terms of influences on beliefs in science and vaccines, and also even astrology or numerology, the perception of these young adults is that actually astrology and numerology is similar to science. So you start seeing certain statistics based on heavier usage of TikTok relative to those that use less than 1 hour. Now, I mentioned less than 1 hour per day, not per week. There is a massive difference in terms of these perceptions of junk science as well. So the usage, there's not a causality, but there is a correlation relative to heavy use, and unfortunately, the link even to appreciation of science.
I guess one of the questions has to be, so as a parent, you're going to have to make this decision. Clearly, you have, at least at this point, right? Your
For
daughter's
now,
only
yeah,
11.
as long as I can.
But what are we expecting governments to do? I mentioned off the top that, of course, governments tell their own people, we don't want you using the TikTok if you're involved in
Exactly.
government. That's dangerous. But how do you regulate this as far as kids go? Can you?
Well, in the U.S. at least, there is more and more talk about actually banning social media for children under, for example, 13 years old. That's been receiving pretty much bipartisan support at the Senate. In Europe, there is more and more discussions around. In France, for example, it did pass Senate, although it hasn't passed through law, to actually prohibit usage of, or no, not prohibit, but requiring parental permission for children under 15 years old to be able to have access to social media. But unfortunately, that's not enough because, as you know, our youngsters, they know how to sidestep these things anyway in terms of their application so much better than we do. And also, how do you actually truly enforce age verification? Those are still things that are not completely clear in terms of how governments work with these social media companies. So really the solution needs to be in parallel. In addition to regulation, parents need to play a more active role. And as you mentioned, to keep them as long for as long a period of time away from social media is one thing. But I think also just educating your children and making sure that they are have better media literacy skills, checking who the sources are, trying to understand what might be the basis of why certain videos are being created, and having good critical thinking skills, including thinking about perspectives of views that are opposing to those relative to our preconceived notions. So those are things that parents can practice to help our children become better consumers of information.
Fair enough. Helen Lee, I want to thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate it today.
Thank you.
Helen Lee Bouygues, president of the Reboot Foundation. TikTok and your kids, what was that number? The average child spends 2 hours per day scrolling through TikTok videos.
Many spend 4 hours.
That's insane.
That's teens. Oof.